Welcome everyone. Akasha here, Nan Akasha from nanakasha.com and BlissLife Podcast. So today we're having another really interesting interview. I'm really excited about this one because it is something that I've always been fascinated with. And this is the Energy Medicine series. So what we're doing is exploring quick and easy ways that you can help yourself in this pandemic or at any time in your life, whether it's a crisis, it's a transformation or massive change. You want to be able to have these different tips, these different ways to apply quickly, to understand. And also, if you want to go deeper, where do you get more information? How do you study this? Or maybe even become a practitioner in one of these energy medicine modalities. So today I'm going to share with you somebody I just really am excited about. This is Wendie. Hi, Wendie.
Hey, Nan.
Thank you, Wendie Colter. And she's a certified medical intuitive practitioner, as well as many other things. And Wendie has been a medical intuitive for 20 years. And not only is she doing this and teaching, but she's been doing this with the healthcare system. She's a trainer with healthcare professionals. So based in Los Angeles, she's taught doctors and nurses and psychologists and therapists and health professionals how to use medical intuition in their practices. How cool is this? So she's also a fellowship faculty member at the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. And she, had an opportunity to spend some time with one of my favorite people, Louise Hay, in her intimate living room healing sessions in Santa Monica way back in the day. That led her to increase her study of various energy modalities, including Reiki and crystal healing, transcendental meditation, transformational coaching, and NLP. Now she has founded the Practical Path, and she is accrediting, you're certifying, right?
Yes.
People for medical intuition for health and wellness. And after the teachings, you also have workshops, right? And this is really, she's going to share with you today how you can apply this to your own life, because there's a lot of medical stuff here that she's able to do. But the really interesting part is, let's talk about what is medical intuition and why does anybody want to know about it? And I like the idea of sharing with us a little bit about the difference between that and energy healing. And if you give us sort of a setup on that, then we'll go a little bit into your background.
Sure, no problem. And thank you for that lovely intro. I also teach, by the way, medical students, fourth-year medical students and residents once a year at Dr. Weil's Center in Tucson, Dr. Andrew Weil, who is a leading light in integrative medicine as well. And I've been very fortunate to teach at Scripps Health in San Diego and other locations of education in all kinds of areas of healthcare. So it's been a really wonderful experience to do that. Well, medical intuition in a nutshell is the ability to use it by using intuition, your intuitive state, view the body, the physical body, and the biofield. And the biofield is defined as the electromagnetic field that surrounds and permeates the physical body. And we colloquially call this, it's actually the name of these things, is the chakra system, which you have a beautiful banner on behind you as the chakra system, and also the auric field, which is the field that surrounds the body. So both of these aspects are what a medical intuitive would work with in order to look for imbalances or blockages in your own energy systems and physical body systems, to see where those are and what they mean and what information can be gleaned from that. The other piece of this is that we're not only looking for physical imbalance, we're looking for where emotional, mental, or spiritual imbalance might be as well. And we're looking at this, Nan, from an energetic perspective. So not a medical per se perspective, like not the way a doctor would look at your body, or the way a psychologist would look at your thing, but the way an energy person, medical intuitive, would look at it energetically. So there's a lot of ways to do that, and I do that a certain way, and that comprises my program. And it really works well for the licensed healthcare practitioners, doctors, nurses, psychologists, and on and on. And energy folks love it too, because it supports that process as well. So you asked me also what the difference is. So I imagine many of your listeners here are energy practitioners, as are you, as am I. I did start with Reiki and all those great things way back when. Ouch. Sorry, just did something with my finger. But it is not energy healing, and actually it really needs to be made distinctive there. Medical intuition, a lot of people define when they're doing their healings and they're getting information in some fashion. And most energy healers relate to this. They'll get some kind of flash of information. I call that a flash of insight, which is really powerful and useful. However, the skill of medical intuition takes that flash and turns it into something more defined and refined. And so it's not a flash anymore. It's actually a method of accessing information that the body really wants your patient or client or whoever you're working with to express. That's what it's expressing to you. So it can get quite detailed. In fact, the whole point is to get detailed and get very
Nice.
clear information. So you can imagine, how a doctor might consider using something like that. Why not talk directly to the body? Why look through a lens or a filter? Why not just get that information direct?
Yeah. And so fascinating. I know when I first heard about medical intuition many years ago, like we were talking about, it was so exciting and interesting. I totally got it and believed in it the instant I heard of it, but that's because I'm an energy girl. I was coming from that place. And yet I think for a lot of people, it seems like too good to be true. It seems like magic and something that
Sure.
isn't really very real. And that's what I think is so amazing, is how you and other medical intuitives, we were talking about Carolyn Meese, who kind of started all this, work with doctors. So
Yeah.
it isn't something that's just over here in left field and people are jumping around in the fields with fairies going, oh, this is so great. This is real. And what I love is that doctors can come to people like you and say, I need a deeper look. I need to affirm this. So it's working together, those
That's
two
everything. Yeah.
modalities.
Thank you for that. That is everything. I firmly believe that the role of medical intuition is in the healthcare field. That's why I've set my programs up that way. And I've been working with doctors for 20 years, did Carolyn Mace, as do many, many medical intuitives, because what we're doing is we're actually viewing the physical body the same way you would look at an MRI. I mean, that's the skill set, is to be able to view it on that level, down to the cellular level, down to the subatomic level. If you want to go there, you can look visually with the skill set at pretty much anything. So it's very valuable. And what Western medicine, as well as complementary alternative medicine, it really, those practices are wonderful, of course, and problematic in other ways. But one of the ways, from my experience, they can be problematic is that all practitioners within their training look through that lens. That's what they're trained to do, whether it's your GP or your endocrinologist or your acupuncturist or your chiropractor or whatever. They're looking through the lens of their education because that is their job. Nothing wrong with that. I respect that immensely. What it does set up, or what can set up, is a little bit of, at the worst, I think you'd call it cognitive bias, meaning if it's not within my purview and my lens, then it doesn't exist,
Right.
or I can't help you, or whatever. At the worst, it sets up, just a tunnel vision is really another word for it. And it's a problem in medicine, cookie cutter medicine. There's a lot of phrases for kind of that limited perspective. And again, this is where I see medical intuition really taking its proper place, and that is to assist when a patient or a client isn't healing, when the treatments aren't working, when the testing is inconclusive or at best, or there's asymptomatic things going on. Well, guess what? Medical intuitives for decades, if not hundreds or longer years, have been intuiting information that is not available perhaps in a current way of testing. And I've got plenty of stories like that, case reports in my own career, where a doctor comes to me because they've tried everything, or a client comes to me because they've tried everything and nothing is working. So what is the answer? And I'm not saying that I always have the answer. I'm saying that with medical intuition, I have a conversation with someone's body. And the conversation is, what do you need and want? What is happening here? What do you need and want, body? Not, a body of knowledge, or not, a cognitive lens, bias lens that I would look through. So it's really fascinating to notice that difference and see where that comes in.
Yeah, I think that this is such an important moment in time, because we've seen alternative medicine, energy medicine, whatever you want to call all these different modalities, really come to the surface, and yet we've barely spread the word when you look at the world. But the problem is that more and more people are not being satisfied with Western medicine, whatever you want to call, and yet we've handed over our power to them, right? And most people just go into one doctor. They take their car to 3 places to get a quote, but they don't do that with doctors. And
Good
if that
point.
doctor, right, it's like, I used to rehab houses. I would get 3 quotes for the foundation, and yet people will just walk into one doctor and listen to them, even if they don't feel seen or heard. And how many times have we heard stories of people who were like, well, I was, told there's nothing else we can do for you. Good luck. Go home.
Well, the statistics are kind of shocking, and that is that medical error is the 3rd leading cause of death after cancer and heart disease. And from a medical intuitive's perspective, you can imagine that statistic, while tragic, is also extremely unnecessary from my point of view, and from a medical intuitive's point of view. There's no reason that number has to be so high. We can see things and view things and intuit things that medical science may not even have a test for it. Here's a good example of this. Many years ago, I was seeing what is now called SIBO, S-I-B-O, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. And all of the information about gut health is, of course, very much in the public eye. 20 years ago or so, I was seeing these bacterial overgrowths in people's small intestine. I didn't have a medical name for it. I'm not a doctor, but I could see that it was there, and it really wasn't in the public eye. And I knew that the people that were coming to me with this were not getting tested properly, or it was not being understood properly. And, I'm not the only medical intuitive. It's story after story after story where, we are able to discern things that perhaps are being missed. And that's so important in medicine. If you don't get a correct diagnosis or treatment, what are we dealing? And the other part about it is that, and I'm not saying again, there's no 100% anywhere down the line, but I will share with you the empirical data, or at least the pilot study, I'll put it that way, that we concluded last year with my graduates. Would you like to hear about that?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I'm very proud of it, and it's actually leading to that pilot data we gathered has led us to what will be a very important study through University of California, San Diego. So what we did was I looked at the literature, the medical literature, to see if anyone has studied intuition in healthcare. And the answer to that is there's a ton of literature about intuition in healthcare. However, there is 0 literature on the skill of medical intuition specifically as a deliberate skill in healthcare. And when I teach nurses, they know that they're supposed to trust their gut feelings, their hunches with the patient. They know that. They're taught that, but they're not taught how to do that. They're just taught to pay attention to that. So what I can teach is, well, how to actually do that deliberately on demand. So when I looked out there certainly are books, and Carolyn Mace's books are phenomenal. Certainly Anatomy of the Spirit is a primer in what medical intuition is, and there are others. I've lost my train of thought here. Oh, literature. So when I saw that there wasn't a test, I know that my students, my graduates, my certified graduates, we already knew we were getting very high anecdotal evidence. That was clear in the feedback and the case reports and the SOAP notes and all the rest of it that we keep. And I said to my students, are you willing to test yourself on this? And they all said, yeah, sure, of course. So what we did was I worked with some folks down in San Diego to create, as accurate a data set as we could get, in just a pilot study, a small pilot study. And we ended up having 67 test subjects. And they came from a lot of different areas. They were kind of self-selected, but a lot of them a good number of them came from the UCSD medical system that wanted to be involved with this. They were curious and excited. And we didn't vet them for anything up front. We just said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We gave them what you would call a blinded session, meaning the medical intuitives had no information ahead of time. There was no intake. Actually, eyes are closed in the session the way I teach, so there was no visual cues either. And we came out with these results, which we're very proud of. We had 94% accuracy rate in location of primary healthcare issue, location and evaluation. Now, how we know that is that the subjects filled out a survey afterwards, and they just gave their impressions. So that's what we came out with, 94% accuracy in location and evaluation of their primary issue. And then,
Wow.
higher even for secondary, tertiary issues, up to 100% accuracy there. We also look at how life experience can influence this, because we want to look at the underlying causes. So one of the questions we asked was, is there a correlation here between what the medical intuitive saw as a life experience that may have led to this? And we got 98% accuracy there. 98%, unheard of. The other thing we asked is how, and this was one of those questions you just thought, well, what else can we ask these folks? And we had a whole long list, but one of the questions we asked was, if you have a known medical diagnosis, how consistent was the medical intuitive with that? And again, no intake was taken. About half of the people, again, we had 67, so about half of that said, yes, I have a medical diagnosis that I agree with, and is this is what I'm being treated for. Of course, we didn't know ahead of time. And we got 94% accuracy rate consistency rate with that group of the half. And that was just kind of blew the roof off. We're like,
Wow. No kidding.
okay, there's something here. We saw many other things. All that data is on my website at thepracticalpath.com. So I sent all that to a colleague down in the School of Medicine, UCSD School of Medicine, at their Integrative Medicine Center, and his name is Dr. Paul J. Mills, wonderful man. He's also the director of research for the Chopra Center,
Oh.
and he's very open to this. And he looked at the data and he said, okay, I think it's time we do a gold standard study on this particular skill, because there isn't one out there. And so we are very blessed to have him on our, supporting this. And we're in the process of fundraising for that study. If I say that to your group, maybe they'll be interested in
Amazing.
finding out more.
Yes,
But
yes,
hopefully
yes.
we'll get that put together and have a peer review published journal articles on this particular skill. And it needs to get out there. People need to know the value here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the difference between you, just briefly, between what you do and Silva method? Are you familiar with Silva?
People have asked me that. I do not know. And
Okay.
if there's anyone here who works in Silva, I'd love to talk to them, because for other reasons as well. But it may be, I don't know if they're still teaching any kind of thing like that.
Yes.
There are
Oh,
other,
yes.
okay, well, maybe we can talk afterwards. There are other ways to access this kind of depth of information for sure. My program is a 9-month program. I certify people, and I have accreditation for certain areas of healthcare, for nurses, for acupuncturists,
Mm,
and also we're going to be getting more accreditation as we go. And this is a way for people to, I would say, a very defined period of time. 9 months isn't a lot of time, but it is a very fast track program. And it's
that's
designed
nice.
for people to start using this right away in their practices with their patients and clients. And again, everyone is coming out with these high marks of percentage of accuracy, which is just very gratifying.
Yeah. Well, and Silva isn't that. I want to make it clear. Silva doesn't have your depth of, certainly accreditation or all of those. But my first experience with this was the first time I did Silva many, many decades ago. And you learn to take your mind into different brainwave states. And then the last day, you learn all these different things. They do this sort of it's not tested or anything, but they give you somebody and they have their information, but they don't tell you. And they just say maybe the first name and they give you a few things and that's it. And then you just practice what you learn to scan their body and their energy field, and you say what you see. And so my first time I said things like, there's a lot of white light here and I see a blob of something here, that was kind of how it came through.
Sure.
But it was fun when they were like, oh my gosh, they have this, they have that, and you have that accuracy. And I think one of the most powerful things about what you're doing and the way you're teaching is feedback. When you get that feedback that what you intuited was right, it changes everything.
Well, consider a medical intuitive working with a doctor, with a patient who has something that is not responding to treatment. And imagine the value there. And I have stories about it where that information that the body really wants the practitioner and the client, the patient, to know, this is not only what is going on, this is why it's going on. Right now, integrative medicine is like ramping up, and functional medicine, and these are what's really the same thing. It's the way to look at a patient not through that one lens of medicine, but to see, well, what is this modality? What is acupuncture about? What is chiropractic about? What is meditation about? What is energy about? And the doctors are finally starting to look at this because their patients have been coming back for the last how many years going, hey, my stress level's down because I'm doing meditation. Well, okay, that's good, So what we're seeing now is an interest in all things, quote, energetic. Thank goodness, because, people have been practicing these for centuries, millennia, and that was original healthcare when you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And when we marry the two together, we really have something exciting.
And that's what's perfect. Yeah.
And here's another thing I want to say to your listeners and to you. I am not one of those medical intuitives that has a bias about anything. If I have a bias, I'm not doing my job, right? Because what if that surgery or that medication or that treatment that comes from a tradition you may not be so thrilled about, like Western medicine, what if that thing is actually, the body can handle it, is working with it, it's actually working, it's causing, a good quality of life shift or something along those lines. I can't prescribe. That's not within my scope of practice. I never would. I cannot diagnose, not within my scope of practice. But what I can do is tell my client, go take this to your doctor. This is what I'm seeing here. Please take this to your doctor and get a licensed healthcare professional to corroborate or to give you their perspective as well. It gives information. And not as well. I mean, honestly, your doctor's kind of the bottom line with your health because they have a lot of information. But we want to be able to know, will acupuncture work for me? Does my body resonate with this? Does my body resonate with chiropractic? Does it resonate? Does it want that? Because people spend a fortune, going from this to that to the other and not knowing. That's another thing that medical intuitive should be able to discern, where the best course could help and lead. There's so many benefits. One of the benefits that the clinicians are finding is that it actually increases their patient compliancy. And that's one of those, compliancy means that the patient understands the treatment plan and actually follows it, which is a major issue in medicine of all kinds, not just Western medicine. Every form of healthcare has that issue. The thing is, when a person understands from their body's perspective, which is them, not some other perspective, from their body's perspective, what's going on and what's needed or wanted or asked for, and also the history and the underlying driver of that imbalance, that changes the game, I've found, for people over the years. And
I can see that. That would be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it can even lead to what people call miraculous healings. These are not
Yeah,
miraculous.
yeah.
There's a shift occurred and something was able to shift. And that's all about what medical intuition can assist with.
Well, and like you say, there's a different level of commitment, confidence, belief, willingness, right? That happens. It's one thing. I'm not against Western medicine, but I use it very, 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 very judiciously. Let's put it that way.
As you do.
And I, raised my children almost 100%. I'm a homeopath and hypnotherapist, energy worker, and all that stuff. And I use lots and lots of natural remedies, and I always look there first. But I broke my wrist a couple of years ago, and you bet I went to the doctor who could set that thing. I didn't sit and do my energy. I did do my energy work, but not only.
Exactly. You want to use, here's the thing, people get very caught up and it's either this or that.
Yeah.
And I am not a this or that person. I'm inclusive. So if that's going to work and the body says, yes, this is what I need, well, by all means, go and do that. If the
Yeah.
body says, whatever it's going to say, but again, ethically speaking, a medical intuitive needs to follow good ethics, and good
Well,
ethics are,
any practitioner, right?
well,
Any
yes.
energy worker. And this is, I find that a lot of the work I do in my light body school with people who want to do this, not just for themselves, but for other people, is you can't come with your idea of what's right for them. You can't project, oh, you have this, you have that. Oh, I know what's right for you. I learned, like you said, that tunnel vision. Yes, if you're an expert in a modality, that's your expertise, and you can't travel outside of that, fine. But one of the things that I learned was radionics. Most people have never heard of it. Rife machines and other things like that, if you've heard of those, they use frequencies. So radionics is original. I learned from a lady in France, and I have all the instruments and books with all the little numbers and all this stuff. A lot of it's in storage because I'm traveling and living in other countries. But what I found was the most powerful thing I learned learning that modality was we tested people who came to us, every system in their body, every organ, every system in their physical body, every energetic system from subtle bodies and so on, from 0 to 100, what's functional perfection of what's happening right now. So it gave us a map, right? And then we still didn't say, I know what's right for you. We tested what was the optimal treatment or remedy for them at this time. And it included everything. Do you need to go to a doctor? Do you need a chiropractor? Do you need acupuncture? Do you need Reiki? Do you need herbs? Do you need homeopathics? Because, and I still teach that way to this day, I refuse to go, oh, I know what I need. I'll go over and I'll get my pendulum. I'm a master pendulum worker, so please learn to muscle test or do something where you can test it. But we use a Faraday cage, right? Yeah. We would use a Faraday cage and all that. But I jokingly say that I learned pendulum from the pendulum Nazi, because it was literally like this. I'd pendulum, okay, this is what I got for this patient. She'd double check me. No, do it again. No, do it again, But it was phenomenal because I really understand now. You tune into that person like you're doing, you're reading their body, their energy, all their body systems. I call it your light body, your mental body, your emotional body. Every system is integrated. They're interacting.
They are interactive.
And then you say what resonates with you, like you said. So sometimes in the beginning, I used to be like, oh, I think you need all these remedies, and I'd want to give a client all these things.
This is a big issue in alternative medicine, or whatever you want to call it, complementary medicine. Yeah, is that everybody? So one of the things that medical intuitives, my trained medical intuitives, can do is prioritize. And prioritization is key, because you start throwing the recipe book and the encyclopedia at the body, it's not going to be happy, and it may not even be worth it. So, and it's expensive. If you've ever walked out of your naturopath, your chiropractor, or your acupuncturist office,
all those pills and all those things.
Yeah, now I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but and I also, not everyone here is going to like what I'm about to say. I'll just give you that. But kinesiology and pendulums, as wonderful as they are, it sounds like you got a pretty rigorous training in that.
Well, we have DNA, right? We have the DNA.
As wonderful as they are, the body has its own conscious awareness. And if I am a practitioner working with my pendulum, or I'm working on myself with a pendulum, my body is going to have its own point of view, right? And so that, in my opinion, or kinesiology, the body has its own point of view. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it's not effective. I'm saying be aware.
No, you
because
have, that's why I agree. Yeah, you
because a
have to be
medical,
clear.
well, what does that mean? You know, in medical intuition, it is and I'll throw a word out here for you, because this is the cornerstone of what I teach. I teach energetic neutrality for my practitioners. And that is a key skill for any medical intuitive, frankly, for any energy healer. And it's frankly, in my opinion, not well taught, because it means something. So if my energy is neutral and I'm working with your energy, even as a healer, because I do have a healing modality, I'm number one, I'm not going to be picking up anything from your energy. And empaths are the kings and queens of this. They just soak everybody's stuff up like a
Yeah,
sponge, right? That's not neutral. I
exactly.
can tell you, that's the
Exactly.
epitome. But in every other way as well, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically, you know, you name it. And one of the very first things people learn from me in my program, and also in my workshop, which is a one-day workshop, that you can learn neutrality skills, and you'll learn a bunch of things, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But the basic one is how to get your energy, your own physical body and biofield in a neutral enough state so that you're not picking up what the rest of the world is going through. And right now, with the pandemic and COVID-19 and just the state of the world, boy, do we want to have those skills. They build resilience and they build neutrality. So in a nutshell, I could say, well, that's what I teach, you know, along with the
I
skills
love
of
that
medical
though.
intuition. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and that's exactly what I meant. Like, you have to take your bias and you have to learn to become a clear and open channel, a clear, neutral space
Clear neutral
for
space.
what's for them and not project onto them. So
Yeah,
that's powerful. I love that. After this, I want to learn a little more about
sure.
that.
I can tell you that the workshop is called Medical Intuition for Healing. And I put this workshop together because there were plenty of people out there that actually many of my students said, you know, my clients and patients want to learn more, but they're not going to go through a 9-month training to become a medical intuitive. That's not their perspective. What can you give them? I said,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
got it. You know, right now I have a couple of things for people. One is this workshop, which is a 6-hour workshop. And if they go online, I've got them coming up throughout the year. So go take a look at that. And people will learn how to work with their own energy for health and balance, for energetic balance, for their own health and wellness. And part of it is we learn how to work with our energy field, how to work in our mind's eye to do a couple of things. One is to talk to our body, because that's what I do as a medical intuitive. I talk to your body. So what a great thing to learn how to talk to your own body and get information that your body wants from that neutral space. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
fabulous, right? We
Yeah.
also use visualization techniques and how to help heal ourselves. And there's just a lot of wonderful information, as well as kind of an introduction to what medical intuition is, some of the research, some of the history. It's really a fun class.
Perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
And what else do you have? You said you have a few things.
I also have on the website some free gifts for people. On the website, under, I believe it's the services menu, there's a drop down that says guided meditations. And those are 5 or 7 minute meditations on really how to work with your own energy field and also how to begin that dialogue. So these are little thumbnails that I've expanded into a bigger workshop, along with other things. One is how to speak to your body. That's called Your Body's Wisdom. There's a whole series called Energy Essentials, which I really recommend. And these are 5-minute videos on how to use grounding, how to use energy shielding, how to release things out of your energy if you don't want them there and gain more neutrality. Just a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Perfect. Perfect. And tell us the website again.
The website is thepracticalpath.com. And if you sign up for our newsletter, we have a free gift of an ebook on all my blogs and articles about intuition, which is fun reading. And that's for anybody who
That's
wants to join our
great.
newsletter.
I love it. So now we're sort of doing this backwards, but so before we end, tell us a little bit about, I know you had some intuitive experiences as a child that sort of primed you for this path in your life. Share a little bit about that and any other stories that you've had along the way of yourself or clients and other things to really inspire people.
Well, we could go on for hours and hours here, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. I was an intuitive child, as I'm sure you were too, Nan, and I'm sure so many of your listeners are. And what happens to intuitive people is one of two things. Either they get shushed a lot, or they get ignored, or they get told they're too sensitive, or all those sorts, some combination of all that jazz. I was actually really fortunate in that my mother kind of encouraged creativity. And intuition is a creative effort. So she thought that was kind of funny, and they didn't understand it, my parents, but they didn't discourage me anyway, put it that way. So I didn't think there was anything wrong with me, growing up, which a lot of people do until later in life, where I was like, how come I know this and you don't, that kind of thing. Two turning points happened for me. One was a dear friend of mine was one of Louise Hay's assistants way back in the day, and he knew I was into sort of woo-woo things, and he said, you should come check this out. And I was a newbie to all of this, but I was interested in all of this. And I went to, she was giving these, she was working with the AIDS community in Los Angeles at that time. It was like the late 80s. And she would have everybody come into her living room in Santa Monica and do affirmations and guided imagery and things like that. And then someone would volunteer for a healing, and they'd lie on the carpet, and we'd all there's a group of, 15, 20, 25 people, and we'd all just do whatever to send energy to somebody. And I remember for the first time, I'm like, I don't know what the heck is going on here. I closed my eyes, I put my hands out, and I felt this rush of like coming through and out my palms. I'm like, okay, it was really wild, and I had no idea what to expect, and it was fascinating. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. And I read all the books and was just really interested in this. And one of the books I read a little later from that point was Deepak Chopra's book, Quantum Healing. If you haven't read that, read that. That is his sort of background and how he went from an MD to starting to incorporate these wonderful mind-body skills in his practice. One of the things he talked about in the book is how he worked with patients to shrink their tumors, cancer patients to shrink their tumors by using visualization, mind-body techniques. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. What happened not long after that is that my body actually developed a little tumor. And luckily it was benign. It was a little dysplasia, which means abnormal cells that forming a little growth. And when I talked to my doctor about it, she said, well, we're gonna remove this surgically if that's all right. It's not cancerous, but you might as well not, take a chance. And I said, great, no problem. Hey, I just read this book, or I read this book by Deepak Chopra where I can shrink tumors with my mind. And, she gave me that look that, people give you when they think you're nuts. And she said, well, I probably won't hurt you. Go ahead. And so
I love it. Probably won't hurt you. Go ahead.
You. It's all right.
Do your
Bye.
silly thing.
Okay, kid. I got a lot of that in my life. Okay, kid. And so what I did was there's like this 2-week window between that appointment and the surgery date. I thought, yeah, I'm just going to do this. And I was doing Transcendental Meditation at the time, which is a lovely, lovely meditation technique. And after my daily meditation, I would sit there and do what Dr. Chopra said. You just get an image and you visualize the thing. And so I decided to pick an image that made me laugh because I'm a total goofball. If it's not funny and fun, forget it. And so what I picked was this image of happy little soap bubbles and a little scrub brush scrubbing that little thing away. Scrubbing bubbles really is what I was using, that funny little cartoon, right? And I used that image because honestly, it made me laugh. And I only did that for a couple of minutes, and I saw that little tumor dissolving in my mind's eye, and that's all I did. And Nan, I didn't even pay attention to the thing. I deliberately avoided looking at it, dealing with it. I just did that exercise. And I went to the doctor 2 weeks later, and again, another moment I'll never forget. In the pre-op, I hear her just sort of do this big gasp, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to die, thanks. What was I thinking? And she said, what did you do? I'm like, what? it was about the size of a nickel, and it had shrunk to about the size of a pea, a little bit more than half in 2 weeks just by doing that. And that was not what that little tumor was going to do. It wasn't that kind of tumor. And at the, after the surgery, I came to the post-op and I gave her a copy of the book. I was like, you got to know what I just did.
No
And that was
kidding.
like the springboard for me to really get into the whole idea of what is happening in the mind, between the mind and the body, that something like that could happen. And the more I researched, the more I read, Biology of Belief by that
Yeah.
wonderful, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting, his name. Wonderful,
Oh,
wonderful.
Bruce
Lipton,
Lipton.
Dr. Bruce
Yeah,
Lipton, of
yeah.
course.
Oh, I love it.
And this
Love it.
whole body of work about what that means.
Yeah.
And so I became an energy healer. I mean, what else, right? I became an energy healer eventually. And I also noticed that because I had trained myself in intuitive perception over the years, and I mean visual, like I can see things in my mind's eye, I was actually able as an energy healer to see right into the body as I was doing my work. So we talked earlier about that flash of information. I was getting an encyclopedia, like I can see everything. Not only that, I can see when you were 4 years old that trauma, blah, blah, blah. And I realized that there was something really to that. So I did more study. I studied what I call classic clairvoyance, just to get that technique to where, I knew what I was doing with it. I also became a teacher of those skills, energy medicine and clairvoyance, at a school I studied at. I taught for 5 years, and it was a fabulous experience. But it wasn't medical intuition. It was energy healing, which is one very specific kind of a way to look at it. And it was clairvoyance, which is really, a classic psychic training. And I thought, well, guess what? Why are my clients healing faster? Because I was kind of like, there's this gap here. And I realized when I looked around, there was really nowhere for me to go study that at the time. It's more than 20 years ago. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do because I was doing it anyway. And doctors were calling me because they were hearing that I was somehow in my energy healing work doing things a little differently. And my colleagues were sending me their really tough cases, because what every energy healer knows is that you can work on someone's energy and they might come back the next time with the exact same issue, right? The
Oh, yeah.
energy is still congested in that area. Why didn't it release? Well, medical intuition fills that gap. And the more I realized that, the more I developed my own techniques and process and method. And I knew at that point, Nan, that if I didn't teach healthcare providers, I didn't want to just be the lone unicorn or the series of lone.
Exactly. Right?
I
Save the
want to
world by
actually
yourself. You
teach.
can't. Yeah. Yeah.
So I developed my program and I launched it over a series of years, but opened it in 2009 and just developed and developed and developed. And now, it's really a pretty accurate, I can say now, because of our pilot study,
Mhm.
method of how to use this skill set and really support any modality, any healthcare skill, from Western medicine to allopathic to energy medicine. Because think about it, if you as an energy healer do a medical intuitive scan and look at all what's, the lay of the land, so to speak, and where these things come from and what's going on, number one, you'll know how to work with your modality more accurately. Number two, you'll have some information for the client to take to their practitioners, and it just opens up a much broader conversation.
Yeah.
And
And what I like, yeah, and I like about it too is, again, it almost by the nature of what you do, it's not exclusive. Like,
exactly.
just do my thing. I'm right. Everyone else is wrong. I do think that, because we all come from the dark woods by ourselves and have now have the internet and we're finding each other and all that, it's wonderful. But there has been that sense of, oh no, this or that.
People
And I
get very
love,
caught up in that. And, it's unfortunate. I understand that, because there are lineage trainings, there's lineage information, there's, very specific ways of doing these things. And my way is, frankly, it's a method that is very specific.
and
That's,
complementary though,
but
to,
that's
like
the
you said,
point.
to everyone else.
That's the point. It's supposed to support all of it. That's the
Yeah.
whole key to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. And what I'd love to do is encourage people, whether you are a practitioner, you do not have to be. That's the great thing about, like, my school. Most people who go through it, they don't want to do it as a job.
Mm.
They want it for themselves. And that's the first thing we do, is work on ourselves, right?
Yes,
Learn these
absolutely.
tools and work on yourself. But the opportunity to complement what you already do. So
Yes.
either through your 6-hour workshop or by going to the full 9 months, which is pretty phenomenal to be able to learn this in 9 months. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, is complements, supports, gives you more confidence. And I know that's another thing that's a big deal for people who are an entrepreneur, essentially, right? As a practitioner, whether you're massage or Reiki or whatever, you can have more confidence in what you do when you have more skills. And so that's why I love what you do. So give us one more juicy story before we
Oh
stop.
gosh. Well, I'll give you a story that really outlines the skill set. Because I think this is, and I tell this one a lot, you know, if you've heard me lecture, you'll hear this one. I've got a ton more, but what I like about this one is it really kind of shows the skill set in its, you know, in a very typical format. And it's not a dramatic story. It's just a story of how this skill can be applied. So I had a client, wonderful woman, businesswoman in her mid 40s or so, who came to me with a very persistent case of tendonitis, wrist tendonitis. And from her perspective, she had no idea how it showed up. She wasn't aware of, you know, any repetitive motion issue or injury. She'd had it for about a month. And, you know, she'd done everything. She'd gone to the doctor and the chiropractor and the physical therapist, and nothing was working, you know. And so she wanted me to take a look at it. Now we all look, tendonitis, that takes a long time, right? Sometimes for the body to like heal. But I was very happy to look at it for her. And so what I saw was, now remember I said I can look at the body like an MRI, and even more in, you know, more detail perhaps in a way, and often in color, you know. So I looked at her wrist, and what I saw was the inflamed tendons in the wrist. And I also saw underneath the tendons bone scar, in other words, an old fracture that had healed. And I also saw what looked like a cloud of grief and heartbreak around the wrist. Something was going on there that showed that. Um, Now, one of the things I can also look at is not only the physical, but also the emotional history, or the mental, emotional life history. And so the body shows me things. I'm not, you know, asking to see certain, I can, but I'm just waiting to see what the body shows me. What it showed me was an image, like a little movie, of her at age 20 or so, 21, playing tennis with her boyfriend, swinging the racket, tripping, falling, and breaking that wrist. And that's where I saw that healed bone scar. That's where that had come from. And the next thing her wrist showed me was her in the ER that same day, getting her wrist taped up, you know, and treated for the fracture, and her boyfriend breaking up with her in the hospital room. So what her wrist was saying is there is emotional, yes, exactly. There is a physical pain and fracture and trauma there. There's also an emotional trauma there. And both of those have been stored in that wrist for all that time. Isn't that fascinating? This is what the body does, okay? It just does that.
Yes.
Even if the injury heals, even if we're over the emotional state, sometimes the body can hang on to it. Now,
Yeah.
what was interesting is my client had an aha moment right there before I could go any further. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm going through a breakup right now." And it turns out she was breaking up. She had broken up with her partner of 10 years. And I asked her, "Well, when did that happen?" She said, "About a month ago, just before the tendonitis flared up." And that was the information from her body, is that this emotional trauma that was revisited from that 20 years ago experience or longer had flared up, and it had showed itself as tendonitis. And she really got that. Now, here's something else that I saw, which is what makes this a very typical story from medical intuition, the way I practice it and teach it. Her wrist had more to show. And that's what we're always going to look for. What else is there? Let's show me some more. There's more here. And what I saw was another image from her life. And here she was at age 5. It looked like she was in a closet. I could see like coats and things behind her. It was very dark, and she was very young, and she was very scared. And she was holding that same wrist in front of her face, that hand, for protection. And what looked like a cane or a stick was coming down and striking her right in that same spot. And it looked like a woman, perhaps her mother, was hitting her there. And my client stopped me and said, "My mother was mentally ill. She used to beat me with her cane and lock me in a closet." Now that's trauma right there. That is classic horrific trauma. Now, she had a memory of this. This was not news to her, but she didn't see how that would even be. Why would you make that logical leap? Well, her wrist was holding, frankly, a lifetime of trauma, grief, physical, emotional weakness, you can call it, in that area of her body. And when it comes up to the moment, in present moment, this is what she was experiencing. And what's fascinating to me about all this, there's a couple of things. Number one is that the body can hold it from that early age, which is very typical of everyone, and that it can recur and recur and recur in these ways until we have an acute or a chronic situation. Now, I checked in with her. That's the job of a medical intuitive, except that I also want to do a scan of the whole body and see how this issue is also affecting the rest of the body. And what I saw was disrupted sleep patterns that came from the emotional trauma of the current breakup. I also saw digestive issues from all the stress that she was going through, a few other things that were not as high priority as this emotional impact. And that's the information I gave her. It was like, well, this is what your body wants you to know. That's my job. And she took it and she said, great. And I called her back a couple of days later. I said, how you doing? And she said, it's gone. She said, I cried and cried. I really processed it. She said, I feel now that I can process these emotions with my partner that I haven't been able to. I've been holding on to not really delving into them. And that's another thing the body does. If you hold something back, it's going to show up in another way. So she had what would you call that? Spontaneous remission? It really was a
Yeah, yeah.
specific expression that her body wanted her to know the meaning of.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you finally heard me, right?
Yes,
You finally
exactly.
listened.
Yeah,
And I do, I'm a master level hypnotherapist too, and
yes,
I've done a lot of shamanic work, and I combine all of those. And I
yes,
can say absolutely, unequivocally, the most profound things I see are when we're doing a journey and I'm in there and I can see and I'm guiding them. I don't tell them, oh, you had a life or you did this or that. I guide them to re-experience it. They
right,
do. And then we see it together. But what happens is there can be absolute instantaneous healing or
right.
realignment or relief or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
just from that remembering, that memory, that understanding. Oh
It
my
hooks
gosh.
it hooks things together. It really does. And I love shamanic work. I love hypnotherapy, and I've taught many, many hypnotherapists medical intuition, and I've taught shamans medical intuition as well, because it's kind of a foundational skill for all that, especially if um, you want to impart information.
Mhm.
One of the things I don't do is walk people back through a process. That's not my job at all. And you would have to have a license in hypnotherapy.
Another skill. Yeah.
You'd
Yeah.
have to have another skill to add to that, or psychotherapy or psychology. That's
Yeah.
not my job. My job is to point out and tell them what their body is telling them and what their body is asking for.
Yeah.
And that is, a lot of information for people. And then I would refer them to you for a shaman healing,
Yeah, yeah, right. Or they go home and do their own work,
do
right?
their work.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah. And
and
that's
that's,
the thing that we see. We see the conflict or a conflict. And what I see are conflicts that happen in this life or are
yeah,
brought in from
sure,
other lives and all
sure.
that. They can come from many different places.
Yeah,
But that conflict can continuously, like you say, keep coming up.
it
And
does.
we don't, if we go to our normal Western mind, we go, how does the wrist relate to the hip? Or how does that relate to this? And yet, like you said, until that conflict is resolved,
Hmm.
received, accepted, then the state can transcend it. You have that in your body and it's going to resonate. So I thought it was so interesting that she was abused by somebody who was supposed to love her. That's
Hmm.
heartbreak. And it was here. And
Hmm.
then she broke that wrist
Hmm.
with the heart, and again, and
On and
how
on.
that common thread, that frequency, so to speak, of
Mhm.
heartbreak and grief was the thing that was bringing that forward. There's something called New German Medicine and some fascinating studies where there was one guy who did studied the brain of all kinds of people who had diseases. And he did the MRIs and all the different scans, and he would look at them. And what he saw was that people who never resolved the conflict never healed.
Well, we're going to see more and more of that. That's called, I think, in the literature, adverse childhood experiences. Yeah.
Mm,
CES, ACEs, apostrophe S. And there's tons of literature out there. You can look online for this aspect of how the body and the mind are connected when it comes to early childhood trauma
mm,
and what we do with it. And they're finding that early childhood trauma has in adult life very powerful health responses that you would not logically put together,
yeah.
and not just depression or addiction or behavioral issues or things like that. Depression can also be clinical and chemical, but it also cancer and emphysema and asthma and just a whole range of things. And of course, they're going to find more because as medical intuitives, that's what we see. We see the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, this is new medicine or new healthcare, I guess we could call it. It's really not medicine by that definition, but it is therapeutic in a way,
Yes.
It is energy medicine, put it that way.
Yeah.
Energetic perspectives on how the body is configured to, hold all this information, and it can cause problems that we don't logically put together. So
Yeah.
it's
And
beautiful.
holistic, really beautifully holistic. And that's one of the reasons
That's
that
the
I
word we
like
want.
these things, is that we're not just looking at your muscle, we're
Yes,
not just
exactly.
looking at your circulatory system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're looking at the emotional trauma and all these other things that go together. And I think that more important than anything right now, there may be people super inspired by this that want to become a medical intuitive or learn that. And I hope that you do. However, right now, with sheltering or lockdown or self-isolation or whatever you want to call it, the degree that you have, if you're living in Europe and you have a tiny little apartment and you can't even leave it, or all the way to, I can go for a walk down the street with my dog, but I'm staying at home.
Yeah.
We're seeing a rise in domestic abuse. We're
Yeah.
seeing all kinds of frustration. People are full of fear. They're full of uncertainty. They're full of anger. And this is going to trigger their conflicts, their responses. And people don't have the space, to take that breath before the response happens. And so when you acknowledge you have these different conflicts, or you begin to understand their body speaking to you, what I love to say is similar to what you're talking about, is when people come, whether they're just doing work with me healing or if they're a student, it's like, oh, this again? I thought I did this already,
Oh,
right?
if I had $1 for everyone who's like, well, I've dealt with this already,
Yes,
I'm like,
right?
well, your body has not.
Exactly, exactly. So it's great, that you don't live day to day with the thoughts in your head
Yes,
of the grief of that breakup or the betrayal or whatever. But because most of us were not taught, we were not raised, feel them, sit with your fear, right?
Right.
Accept your fear. And what is it telling you? Because
Yeah.
I always say, whatever's coming up for you right now, that's what your body's telling you is the next thing to focus on. It's the most important thing in this moment. So instead of going, oh, I don't want to deal with that again, I'm going to power through and not pay attention to my grief of the XYZ or whatever it is, listen.
Yeah.
Listen, because if it's like the 20th time, I used to practice hypnosis sessions with a friend of mine who went through hypnosis and many other modalities with me. We would break boards together and eat fire and do all this great stuff, and we'd hypnotize each other. And one day, many years into it, he came over, did a session for me. I was going through a divorce and a bankruptcy, and so there was a lot of stuff up for me. And I came out at the end of the session, and I looked at him and I said, when am I ever going to be over my father issues? And he goes, I know, right? Like he even knew enough from working with me, and I was tired of it, but it doesn't go away until we go deep enough into that conflict or have these ways of knowing.
Till we understand it, till we
Yeah.
understand consciously what our body, what our energy is, it really wants us to know. And that is, that is a spiritual connection. I'll be honest with you. That's what it is. You need to, well, I don't need to, but one of the methods is, and what I teach is, how do we access that? What am I actually doing there? You know,
Yeah.
how am I getting that information? Well, it's from an extremely neutral place, you know, that has a lot of permission in it. And whether or not you can resonate with that permission is going to be your path.
Yes.
So I'm not sure how that came across, but what I'm saying is that it's the lack of permission, so to speak, that holds these things in place. And, you know, your work and people who are doing work on a deep level, and psychologists and medical doctors and everything in between, you know, complementary alternative, all of these wonderful skills are designed to help us unblock and uncover and all the rest of it. What I personally love, having come from the energy healing perspective, that medical intuition gives us this ground, this foundation of being able to get the big picture at the beginning, just right at the top. Let me just get the big picture and see what's going on in all the systems of your body and all the systems of your energy, and give you that big, and prioritize it, whatever it is that's up for you right now, so that we can, if we're going to move forward with a healing, for example, in my world, or with something else that might work more effectively for you or differently for you, let's see what your body's asking for, what your energy's asking for.
Yeah. So it's the perfect way to have a customized, right?
That's exactly right.
Treatment
It's
plan, or whatever you want to
tailored.
call it. It's
Well,
absolutely tailored to you and your
tailor. Yeah.
current moment situation.
Well,
That's the
whatever's
other thing.
well,
Right?
it could also be chronic issues and things that, are not actually present and, but are there. So it's not just current, it's just whatever it is you come in and want to talk about or work with, that's
Right.
fine.
Well,
But,
what's coming
some
up in
5
optimal
things
at
could
this time, right? Because we say, well, I have this, this, and this, and this, and this. What's optimal now? What's like
well,
prioritize, like we were talking about before.
prioritizing, yeah.
Because the beautiful thing is just you giving them this information about what's going on is going to change their energetic state. Just that information, right? After a session with you, they're going to have a
Sure.
shift.
Well,
Then now they're a different
possible.
place. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then maybe they go do acupuncture.
yes.
And now they may not need 45 other remedies, because each of these things in the next moment, now it's optimal. Now it's optimal. Now that we've shifted this or opened that or discovered this and all that stuff. So, this is so good. I could just talk to you for so long. Oh my gosh, it's so, so good. We're going to have to come back again and visit this, especially
I would
the
love that.
yummy stories. Do you have a
I got a
book?
ton. I'm writing a book now and
Oh,
doing a
good. I was
lot
going
of
to
the
say that.
case
That's the
reports
first thing in my head is I want to hear
yeah,
these stories. They need to
yeah,
be in a book. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
they are
absolutely.
gathering them up.
Oh. Well, thank you, honey. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your time, all of your experience. Thank you for doing what you're doing, because
Thank you.
one of the things that I find truly profound in this moment, and I'm very willing to admit, I didn't think this was going to happen in my lifetime, that we're seeing these kind of modalities come up in the consciousness of people and find a path to accredited, acceptable pathways, and integrating like you are with the medical system. So I want to thank you for not only just listening and following your own path and discovering, creating this amazing program, but also the way that you're taking it forward step by step in systematic studies and working with the medical community to create a way for people, because this is the biggest problem, I think, is access, not just knowledge of these different things, but for people who aren't like us, who our whole lives have been trying to talk to fairies and seeing energy fields or whatever, but who are like, I don't know about that. However, I need something different, because of course, especially back in the day, the only people who ever found me were people who tried everything and 50 times, so
Exactly.
so
Well, we
now
want
there's
it to be more accessible and more
exactly
accepted, and it's a road. I want to
incredible.
stress to all your listeners that medical intuition is not a medical skill. It is an energetic evaluation and assessment, and that comes from the ethical perspective. It's not therapy, it's not medicine. It is an evaluation on the energetic plane, the energetic perspective of your physical body and biofield. And that makes it an assessment and evaluation skill that anybody can use as an adjunct and support to whatever it is they're already doing. So it's thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, Nan. It's just a real pleasure, and I really love your perspectives on all this as well.
Oh, This is so great. So, well, share again. Tell us your website one more time, and then we'll be sure to, in the emails and where you're viewing this, that you'll have the links to Wendie's free goodies too.
Yes, it's www.thepracticalpath.com, thepracticalpath.com. Please visit us there. And if you have any questions, you can contact me through the website. Happy to answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Woo, wow. I'm like more energized when I started, and I was so excited. Oh, so, okay. Thanks everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. Please do us all a favor. One of the things we have to do is create a tipping point on the planet of people who are conscious, who are aware, who are on their path. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know all of these things. You don't have to fix yourself overnight. But if you share this with other people, you share these interviews, you share Wendie, you share all the speakers, you share the ahas that you had with everyone, then we will be able to spread this across the planet. And instead of a virus that's causing pandemic and craziness, we can have spread something wonderful and uplifting. So make sure to check out the rest of this energy series. Bliss Life Podcast is on iTunes or at nanakasha.com. Thanks everybody, and have a beautiful and blessed day. Oops. Okay.